Coming up today, with general elections roughly 6 months away now, lawmakers remain at odds over how to best redraw electoral districts in consideration of sparsely populated rural areas. It's emerged that the ratio of corporate profits to gross national income is higher in Korea than any other member of the OECD. Plus, are we seeing the start of a new Cold War as Russia steps up airstrikes in Syria? The US announces more military aid for Ukraine in its fight against Russian-backed separatists. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 5th of October. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with the latest on efforts to redraw Korea's election districts. More than 20 lawmakers representing rural areas are continuing to protest at the National Assembly over fears their constituencies could be swallowed up. Discussions have been heated up, really, as the rival party floor leaders discuss district readjustments ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. They're going to happen next April. The lawyers protesting outside Parliament say plans currently on the table give no consideration for rural regions and that population should not be the only criteria in the final decision. Now, rival parties have been at odds over how to resolve the problem of rural representation. The new scheme envisions the number of urban electoral districts will increase, while rural constituencies will decrease in accordance with the shrinking rural populations. And staying at the National Assembly, and the nominee to be South Korea's next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is having his confirmation hearing at the Assembly. Army General Lee Sun-jin is being quizzed on Korea's fighter jet program, plans for the possible deployment of a US anti-ballistic missile system called Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, and the timing of the transfer of wartime operational command from Washington to Seoul. He's also expected to be asked about the threat posed by North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missiles programs, its cyber warfare activities, and the regime's submarine power. In a statement prior to the hearing, he said that South Korea had upped its preparedness, as North Korea could launch a provocation sometime this month or the next. If approved, Lee will replace Choi Yoon-hee as JCS chairman. President Park Geun-hye has reiterated the importance of reunifying the Korean peninsula, saying it's one way South Korea can contribute to world peace. During a meeting with her senior secretaries on Monday, President Park said that although reunification efforts must be led by the two Koreas, support and cooperation from the international community are vital as well. Having delivered a similar line to the UN General Assembly in New York last week, President Park said she will continue all diplomatic efforts working towards reunification. A high-level Chinese delegation will attend North Korea's upcoming ceremony marking the 70th anniversary of the founding of its Workers' Party. But will they be carrying a message from Beijing over the North's planned rocket launch? Connie Kim reports.
The North's state-run Korean Central Television says Ryu In-san, a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of China's Communist Party, will head the delegation at Saturday's ceremony that marks the 70th anniversary of the founding of North Korea's Workers' Party.
The Chinese delegation will attend activities marking the 70th anniversary and pay an official friendly visit to North Korea.
Ryu, as the fifth most powerful official in China, will be the most senior Chinese official to visit North Korea since Kim Jong-un came to power after his father died in 2011. Given that Ryu is more senior than even the country's Vice President Lee Wian-chao, watchers believe China wants to mend relations with its longtime ally. However, some experts say China is more interested in maintaining a strategic balance in its relations with the two Koreas.
Beijing is leaving the door to communication open as it cannot completely ignore North Korea. Also, China has the short-term mission of preventing North Korea from launching a provocation marking this month's anniversary.
During his trip to the United States last month, Chinese President Xi Jinping said Beijing opposes any actions that cause tension on the Korean peninsula, adding weight to international calls for Pyongyang to back down from its plans to launch a long-range rocket or conduct a nuclear test. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's ratio of corporate profits to gross national income is the highest among OECD member countries. The results released by Justice Party Representative Park Won-sok on Monday indicate that average corporate profits to GNI ratio was 25.19% between 2009 and 2013, and this is about 7 percentage points higher than the average of other OECD members at just over 18%. In 2000, the ratio was close to the OECD average of about 17%, but rose sharply thereafter, surpassing the 25% mark in 2010. Representative Park says Korea should raise corporate taxes, which are lower than the OECD average. Staying with economic news, and on a rise in foreign deposits that offset a dip in stocks, Korea's foreign exchange reserves inched up from September. According to the Bank of Korea, the reserve reached just over $368 billion at the end of September. That's up $180 million from a month earlier. The value of foreign reserves held in securities dipped from the previous month, while overseas deposits gained $2 billion over the same period. Meanwhile, after reaching a record high of nearly $375 billion in June, Korea's reserves fell, actually, for 2 consecutive months from July due to currency fluctuations. But as of the end of August, Korea was the world's 7th largest holder of foreign reserves after China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Taiwan and Brazil. The Korean government is set to announce how it plans to evaluate and dismiss underperforming senior officials at public institutions. Now, this push is a follow-up measure to the ongoing wage peak negotiations. Shin Se-min reports.
The Finance Ministry is set to release the guidelines for evaluating workers at public institutions and ways to remove underperforming senior officials. The move is part of the government's normalization plan that aims to make it easier to fire employees that are not pulling their weight. Labor reform efforts have so far been focused on adopting a so-called wage peak system that allows older workers to work until later in life, but on a lower salary. The savings are then passed on to hiring younger workers. The introduction of the guidelines is considered a follow-up measure to the wage peak negotiations among unions, corporations, and the government. Officials say the guidelines set for release before the end of the year will state that workers given the lowest ranking or those that don't receive assignments for a set period of time will be dismissed. However, there will be multiple screenings to ensure employees are not let go unfairly. Those workers with poor performance assessments will also have their cases looked at by an independent committee. If they decide the workers should be let go, the president will make the final call. While experts say it is difficult to evaluate workers at public institutions on a standardized guideline, unlike those in manufacturing sectors where they produce outcome in numbers and products, the voices urging for an equal evaluation protocol among private organizations is necessary. The system was implemented in 2006, but no single government employee has been dismissed for lax performance. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, with Russia expanding its involvement in the conflict in Syria and the US expanding its weapons support for the Ukrainian government fighting pro-Russian rebels, a game of tit-for-tat continues between the two countries. Oh Soo-young has his report.
With Russia's defense ministry saying it intensified its airstrikes in Syria, targeting 10 Islamic State positions over the weekend, tensions are escalating between the US and Russia as the two continue their dispute over Russia's involvement in Syria. The strikes reportedly hit a terrorist training camp, including a suicide belt factory. It's not known how many terrorists were killed in the strikes, but Russia says they have considerably reduced the combat potential of the militants. However, Western nations are highly suspicious of Russia's intervention, saying the country is carrying out military action in Syria in support of President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, the US reinstated its support for Ukrainian forces amid a ceasefire with pro-Russian separatists. According to a Russian media outlet, Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko said Sunday that US President Barack Obama had promised to supply new defensive weapons. This follows an agreement made last week with President Obama pledging to give an additional $20 million for defense articles and services. This is said to entail artillery battery systems which will help deter pro-Russian militant attacks. Throughout the conflict, the US has provided the Ukrainian government with military equipment and training worth over $240 million. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, at least 7 people have died after a hurricane hit the southeastern coast of the United States, dumping record levels of rain. Hurricane Joaquin, which South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley called a once-in-a-millennium rainfall, flooded roadways and left thousands of people without power. A container ship from Florida with 33 crew members on board has also gone missing en route to Puerto Rico. The US Coast Guard said Sunday that it believes it has found flotsam that may or may not be from the missing vessel. Now, this hurricane is said to be heading east now to Bermuda. A UNESCO panel has begun its initial examination to include sets of documents related to the 1937 Nanjing Massacre and Japan's wartime use of sex slaves on its Memory of the World programme. The decision is expected to be made this week. Son Jung-in has more.
The Nanjing Massacre was one of the darkest events of the 20th century. Over 300,000 Chinese men, women, and children were slaughtered by Japanese troops in the city of Nanjing in 1937. In June of last year, the Chinese government submitted an application to enlist on UNESCO's Memory of the World program 11 sets of documents related to the massacre and the issue of about 200,000 sex slaves, mostly Koreans, used by Japanese soldiers before and during World War II. On Sunday, the UNESCO International Advisory Committee opened a meeting in the United Arab Emirates to examine them and 90 other nominations for documentary heritage enlistment. Due to the sensitivity of the issue, the advisory members were reluctant to give any details.
We have been told not to comment on anything.
Really?
Ask her. UNESCO.
No, we cannot comment anything.
Until we finish the...
UNESCO's Director General will make a final approval based on the result of the panel discussion.
I believe that we all have some responsibilities to carry out today.
Japan has lodged a protest against the move and asked China to withdraw the nomination, questioning the authenticity of the materials. Amid rising tension between the two countries, the international panel is expected to announce its decision later in the week. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, with community help, busking is becoming more of a common sight on the streets of Seoul, and it is increasingly considered a common art form, and it's also creating its own unique culture. Kim Jeon went to see what motivates these street performers.
Walk through this busy university neighborhood and you're bound to see a number of performers offering up their talents. From hip-hop dancing to singing, sometimes their own acoustic versions of K-pop songs, sometimes songs of their own making.
Street performance or busking is an iconic form of culture in your districts of Sinchon and Hongdae, where I'm at. And competition is fierce when it comes to finding a good spot to perform, especially on weekends. So it's no surprise that some performers actually hire people to save spots for them, all for the sake of better communicating with the audience.
This performer goes by the name of Lucy. She says she's been busking once a week for the past 3 years.
I teach singing classes for a living, but I come here to interact with audiences. It's better to do that here than in an indoor space like a club or bar. Out here, when I'm busking, people sometimes dance to my music, and I really like that.
In some districts, the performers are gaining support from a project by the Korea Busking Cooperative Association and the government. The association runs a website called Sinchon Street Artists that allows performers to reserve a busking location and time slot. Lucy says it has helped make performing less stressful. Ultimately, she's hoping to use the opportunity to hone her skills.
My goal is to become a true musician and hopefully get sponsors so that I can perform with a better sound system. I'm going to keep busking until my dreams come true.
Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we have for you on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com/news, and do download our smartphone application. Just search for Arirang TV in the usual places. We do hope your week is off to a good start. Goodbye.